Hello, everyone, and welcome to the RightVIEWS podcast, a podcast about innovative perspective on capitalism, democracy, and geopolitics. I am Prasanna Naidu, lawyer and founder of Budding Lawyers with Rahul Deodhar, investor, lawyer, and author of the book Subverting Capitalism and Democracy. Okay, so recently there was a movie released on Amazon Prime, I guess. The name was Shershaah. It's based on the life of a soldier, a renowned soldier named Vikram Batra. So I thought, why not talk about him and the Kargil War in general? So why it happened and how it led to certain other events, and then eventually Dr. Batra's death. So Rahul, sir, first let's start with the Kargil War. Like, how did the war start, and what were the events which led which happened later?
Yes, actually, Kargil War is a sort of a defining moment in terms of modern India-Pakistan relations. So India-Pakistan relations have been defined by two sort of weird forces. One is Pakistan's anti-India approach, which has been going on and continues even till date. But on the front, face to face between Indian and Pakistani soldiers meeting face to face, there has always been sort of a professional treatment of opponents, or from Indian side, at least that much we can say. And because they were part of the same army, so there is a hint of that. It is decreased progressively since 1947 onwards, invasion of Kashmir, but there we sort of anticipate or expect each other's armies, expect the other army to be professional. And India has always been very professional about the army, respect to the armed soldiers of Pakistan. Even when we had captured 75,000 soldiers of Pakistan in Bangladesh war, they were treated with proper respect. However, this has also resulted in some sort of an understanding between the armies. There is also an understanding between Indian and Chinese armies on various locations and various positions on the front. Similarly, there was an understanding between Indian and Pakistani armies on certain heights, because these terrains in where the borders of India and Pakistan, the line of actual control in India and Pakistan, India and China, and where these exist, they're in very, very tough terrain. And particularly in winters, you find that this is inhospitable for peacetime occupation. So the heights of these peaks, which are more than 15,000 feet, some are even higher than 17,000 feet, they are very tough to monitor in cold times, in winters. But even in summers, they are very difficult to monitor. But even then, there is always some sort of surveillance going on there. But it was a mutually understood position that some of these heights will not be occupied by both parties, and these are part of their territory, and the armies would step down. So India had certain heights, Pakistan also had certain heights. The armies would step down from them, leaving them unguarded during the winters. So this was a mutually understood thing, because you don't want to trouble me, I don't want to trouble you, is some sort of a logic to that.
I guess there was a treaty. There was a treaty for that also.
There was an understanding. The treaty is worded, if you see the wording, it is all complicated. But, if you see the treaty part of the situation, then it's not like an international treaty where it can be, enforced and all that. But if you look at it as a arrangement. It was mutually beneficial for both armies not to have this, because there was no situation or there was no reason for aggression in these times. However, so there is another force at play here, where Pakistani government, Nawaz Sharif government, started making and developing peace initiatives with Indian government. So people to people peace was supposed to be on the agenda. And that really is not sort of an expected strategy which is backed by the military in Pakistan. So Pakistan, like we had discussed many times, there are two things. The civilian government and the military are two different entities. And in general, the civilian government has a military to protect itself. In Pakistan, the military has a civilian government to sort of, give it some cover. That's the reason. But General Musharraf during this time put up his soldiers into these high locations in occupying the heights. Now, in army warfare, particularly when it comes to heights, there is a basic premise that if you want to capture a height, an enemy is at a height, then your casualty ratio is very high.
Yeah.
So it is easier to defend heights than to attack and capture them. So during the winters, they occupied the heights of Kargil and Drass. Now, the main point of this occupation was not that they could have occupied many heights, but Kargil and Drass had a peculiar advantage. And that advantage was that it was overlooking a national highway which connects to Ladakh.
Okay. So
if they could control the access to all this Ladakh and Leh region, then you would have another, today we have discussed, today meaning in the popular press, we have discussed Chicken Neck, which is the Sikkim point where you can really, it's a flash point where you can really struggle and cut off northeast from India. This was a point where you could cut off Ladakh from India, access to Ladakh. Now, if you see the geographical area of Kashmir, it's very small. It's like, it's very small. It's like 10% of the entire Jammu and Kashmir region. The largest area per se in that Jammu and Kashmir state is Ladakh. And Ladakh has got three powers, so which we call it only two, because Pakistan and China from India's point. But Afghanistan is also having a border with Ladakh. Okay. So Afghanistan, China and Pakistan are the three countries which are sort of have bordering Ladakh. And we have to, build on those three fronts. Now, Afghanistan, we know what is happening. So basically it's China and Pakistan. And that is a very critical point for Indian position. Now, if they would have held these positions and fortified these positions, today we would not have had Galwan, because all that area would be part of China by now. So all this was actually, a pre-planned mechanism to sort of lop off Ladakh region. Now already Kashmir is now we are talking about 1999, where Kashmir was already under intense separatist activity, sponsored by Pakistan, sponsored terrorists were playing havoc in Kashmir. Now, at the same time, if you had lopped off Ladakh, you would have really lopped off entire J&K, almost the valleys of Jammu would have left. Apart from that, which is closer abutting to Himachal and that part. So Haryana and Punjab and that part. So apart from that, nothing would have survived. So it was a very, very crucial decision to occupy these heights in the time of winter, and they expected to hold these heights.
Yeah.
So that would have had an immense geopolitical impact for India in terms of the location.
Also,
that is why it.
This was a kind of a wise move from their end, because these militant activities were going on from like the 90s. It was risen in the 90s itself, this Pakistan backed militancy, and that's why they took the step like after few years, so that they already created a havoc inside Kashmir. Now as the army is busy inside Kashmir, so it's better, they have a good chance to occupy the posts they were planning to at the border.
Exactly. In fact, if you see, you put a finger on a very important aspect of this, because if you see 1989 till 1984-85, Pakistani army was helping Taliban and all these kinds of created assets of United States CIA to fight Russians. Okay. In 89, when Russia withdrew from Afghanistan and 91 Soviet Union collapsed, they had to rebuild that Afghanistan base in favor of Pakistan, which they were building. And what happened was America stopped sponsoring all these Taliban and other actors, the Mujahideen, they used to be called then. So Pakistan had to, they had sort of bred a set of such kind of military assets which were intent on destruction and terrorizing. They had no money now. So they channeled them into Kashmir and Punjab. These Talibani actors and all were ill-suited for Punjabi, terrorism. So terrorism had already started in Punjab by 1980s. The Khalistani movement, but that was more Khalistani. These Talibanis could not infiltrate into the Khalistani philosophy because they were completely antithetical to each other. So the Talibanis and Mujahideens were directed into Kashmir from 1991 onwards. So if you see 1991 onwards, the terror activity in Kashmir started really accelerating. And Afghanistan started consolidating for Pakistan. Okay, so Pakistan was at its peak. Pakistani GDP per capita was higher than India. So Pakistan was richer than India on a per capita basis. And it had military success in Afghanistan backed by the US. And it had two ongoing theaters in India where it had deniability. In Punjab through Khalistanis, and in Kashmir through these JKLF and other entities, which were the feeders for Taliban and other fighters. This was the best sort of situation for Pakistan. So they were executing perfectly. And the turning point of this, the crowning moment, the crowning glory would have been to sort of capture and retain these heights in Kargil and Drass. Then you would have had the next step would be lop off Ladakh in partnership with China. China, they had already ceded some territory to China in Ladakh. So they could do that from the Pak-occupied Kashmir. Part of that is given to China. So they had a partnership with China anyways. And they were about to score multiple wins over India. So imagine you would have had Ladakh and Leh lopped off, controlled by China. Kashmir intensely under separatist movement. Jammu under threat. Punjab under sort of Khalistani influence. So you had multiple, inroads into the country. So this was the situation where the crowning moment was to control the heights and retain the control. That was the only thing. Now, in this moment, they had a very good strategy of going and occupying these heights in the late winter, before Indian Army reoccupied these positions. They went and occupied them. And it was very critical to quickly eject them out of those situations, those positions. Okay, not let them build and consolidate. There was international pressure. There was some sort of a, build up. So the thing is, their strategy was to ride out this initial global pressure and then build on. And then, what China tries to do, first erect some huts, then next year make it fortified. The third year there is a complete base with air force, military, even submarines in some cases.
First so capture some villages.
So very small territory and some, these kinds of things. So this is what they had tried. So it was very crucial to sort of hold and get back these territories and, evict them beyond the heights into their own territory. And that is where it is more difficult, because mostly plain warfare, in the plains, the warfare is, there are few advantages to having warfare in a relatively plainer location, because you can at least have some distinct mobilization, you can have air force backups. In Himalayas you cannot have much air backup also, because the planes have to navigate into really sharp, the ranges are so close to each other and the height is so high that the planes have to really maneuver, and there is also it's not like easy to maneuver location. You can easily lose few planes just because you are not careful. And if you try to use helicopters, you can have another peak couple of kilometers away, which is higher than your helicopter. So you can hit those helicopters using simple rocket launchers also. So all sorts of difficulties are there, particularly in Himalayan ranges. They are very close and very inaccessible, and the weather changes on a dime. So you start the aeroplane, by the time you reach the thing in 10 minutes, the whole thing is cloudy. You can't see anything.
Yeah, so it's very difficult to navigate.
It's very difficult. Yeah, and we did not have all this advanced avionics that we talk about today, where satellites guide the plane. So even though it's completely foggy and the pilot is completely blind, you can have like computer guiding. There is a mountain in front of you, even though you can't see it. Because in Himalayan fog, you really can't see more than 2 feet. Okay, that's all visibility is there.
Yeah, we are talking about 90s, where like computers were just introduced in India.
Yes, and Indian Air Force did not have that kind of high-end satellite enabled. We did not have remote sensing satellites already, properly helping the navigation part of, not remote sensing, communication satellites and military satellites, and all these assets were not fully evolved. So if you see INSAT developments and ISRO satellite coverage of India, it has really accelerated after 2001, where lots of, you will see, they have launched OceanSat, Inmarsat, this Sat, that Sat, the communication part as well as military part as well as other part, all of them have been launched for remote sensing, this application, that application, mapping. Now we are saying we have this GPS system which you can which you can use. But that time it was all, pilot's own judgment. So very difficult to give air support in these kinds of location terrains and all. So our strategy was like really old school, it's like sniper strategy, where the sniper, the gun is actually at the base, because now you are using a bigger gun, the Bofors gun, a howitzer. And the officer or the spotter in sniper terms, he is up on the cliff, just 100 meters below the, enemy, or 200 feet or 150 feet below the enemy. And he's saying, you have to hit on this point, giving the directions. And the Bofors gun will be directed to hit that point in the bunker where they are located on top of the hill. So if you see the hill, the enemy is here, your spotter is here, your gun is here. Okay. and the gun should hit here, and then the spotter will check whether they are hit properly or not, and they are not, the enemy is still there. So it's like, okay, hit a little to the left, then this guy again hits with the second round, and this is how the firing and this was to be conducted.
Yeah.
By the way, and if they miss our guy is here, okay. So if they miss a little, they will hit our guy. So you have to be really precise. Yeah.
So by the way, you were showing it in the video, but for the listeners who are just listening to the podcast, the year thing was basically he was saying the enemy is on the top and we are like below the enemy. So there are high chances that the soldier has to be very accurate, firing from below to the enemy who is on the top. So otherwise he may hit his own men.
So you can imagine a coconut tree where you want to, hit the coconut. So you are halfway up the tree, very close to near the coconuts, and then you are guiding the fellow who is on the beach, saying you hit the coconut, and supposedly if he hits and the coconut falls, then it's okay. If it doesn't fall, then you have to guide him again. And there's a good risk that the fellow who is shooting from below can hit you also. So that is a risk. So this was the situation, and we had to capture these places very fast, and that's why our losses, because you're capturing heights, were very high. We also realized that our aircrafts are not very adept at securing these heights, because they were heavy aircrafts. Some were totally old school MiGs, so they were not able to do. So the only aircrafts which reliably flew during Kargil was the Mirages, the Dassault Mirages. That's why we have some affinity towards Dassault. So the Rafales make sense for us, because Rafales were newly launched. Mirages are old, but they are from the same company. So they were able to hold on. We did not even have good helicopters, because helicopters are much easier to use in such scenarios, even though there are a lot of risk, but they are much better than others. So like Apaches and Chinooks would have been really helpful.
Okay, so let's now move on to Mr. Batra's life and history. I mean, firstly, I was kind of confused, and I was thinking that why he so famous? Like, I'm not like trying to disrespect his contribution, of course. There have been so many martyrs, right, from so many wars, and like so many sacrifices we have seen, but Mr. Batra's contribution, or Mr. Batra's name, is like a unique standing in the among all the martyrs. So I was just curious to know, why is that so?
No, Captain Batra, when he was earlier, he was a lieutenant at the start of the war. But if you see his story is the story of a normal person. So basically, in the 90s, it was an era where normal Indians, not the exceptional or pedigreed Indians, but the normal fellows, they started winning. And that is the story of Sachin Tendulkar also. That is the story of Narayan Murthy also. That is the story of most of the successes that you see in the 90s. It's a story of normal Indians winning in the world stage. That's the story. So if you look at, people always say ki Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, Sachin Tendulkar is greater than Ricky Ponting, then is Lara greater, this greater, that greater. But Sachin Tendulkar is not a cricketer. Okay, for Indians. Sachin Tendulkar is a representative of Rahul Dravid or Saurav Ganguly. They are normal people, middle class people who went to schools that everyone during that time went to. They had the same habits, normal stuff. Okay. And then they put in a lot of effort. They went to global stage, and then they just dominated. That's their story. Narayana Murthy, he's a normal person. He's like, any person who went to engineering, did, was doing coding, this, that, and then suddenly, he said, I can become a founder. I will start up a company, and then I'll start winning all these new businesses across the world. And that is the story that resonated with Indians. Same way, if you see Captain Batra is, parents are teachers, middle class family, average household, nothing exceptional. If someone like, I'm the 5th generation Indian Army personnel, it has, of course, we have a lot of respect, but it's not resonating with the general public as much, because they say, he comes from a family of warriors. It's okay. He's a family of warriors. Okay. Then you will find someone is from this background, that background. His father was like his great grandfather was a general in Rajput army, something like that. And all these kinds of stories, they don't resonate with normal people. And Captain Batra was like a simple, normal person who could be anyone. Next door neighbor, they could have a Captain Batra, and he went to school. He was normal. It's not like he was exceptionally different from normal people. And then he went into the army, and he showed exceptional courage, and he showed truth, valor, and he remained true to the values that we have all across India. That when you are in the army and you are defending the country, you are expected to do certain things. So particularly his Barkha claims a lot of credit for making him famous. But actually Barkha interviewed him, and she had a lot of access which she used and misused to sort of inform enemy positions, because her radios and transmitters were traced by Pakistani intelligence to understand where Indian locations are. Because at times, we did not have satellite coverage. Pakistan also were equally blind.
Yeah.
And this kind of intelligence.
This was like by mistake. No, she didn't do it purposely.
See, I mean, of course, everything is by mistake. But if you have the stupidity to go into a live operation and not understand all these things, then don't go to a live operation. No? Go to a zoo and try to broadcast from there. Nobody is interested in the location of the zoo. They know where it is. So, when you kind of deal with these kinds of specific live, and she repeated it in 26/11 in Mumbai when Kasab was operating. So again, she did not know. So first time we can excuse, second time, what is the excuse? So it means it's a repeat offender. So anyways, that's a separate issue altogether. But she did interview Vikram Batra, and this time he was a lieutenant, I think. And the thing is, if you interview any army personnel, okay, they will say they are very enthusiastic about. That's the power of Indian Army. The Indian Army is, we have happy soldiers. Now, that doesn't mean our soldiers are having no problems. We give them enough problems and enough troubles. But our soldiers have that some inherent sense of happiness, which comes from defending their own country, because they are,
passionate.
And there's this new, another captain, I forget his name. He's on Twitter, and this very Gaurav Arya. So Captain Gaurav Arya, he says that Indian Army is a moral army. That's why we have that positive vibe around us, because we don't indulge in anything negative. So we always help. So that's why they have that positivity, and that is what you found in Captain Batra. And she would have interviewed anyone, he would have probably, not in so many words, but he would have appeared and approached a similar way. So Captain Batra was just saying what any Indian army officer would say in this kind of, you bring it on, boss. We will defeat you because we are the force of good. We will capture these positions. You have made an encroachment into our territory. We will fight you. And that's what he was saying. But he said it in a very, very unique way. So he connected it with the advertising slogan of Pepsi that time. So Pepsi was running a huge slogan, "Ye dil mange more." So so he said, "Ye dil mange more, bring it on, boss. What is the next? I'll get the next one of you also." So this is nothing, but he communicated it in such a passionate way, which connected with the entire youth. So Pepsi, in fact, had tried to connect with the entire youth with this slogan. If you see advertising of "Ye Dil Mange More," you will see cricket, you will see Bollywood, you will see all sorts of advertises which were going on that time, which were connecting with the youth. And this person used that to connect with the youth. And his background also was like a normal person. It was an instant connect. And he loved to say this, "Ye dil mange more, boss, bring it on." So he said it. I mean, that's what he used to say. He said it. Okay. And that created that connect. And it did not stop there. If it would have stopped there, it would have been, a phenomenon, but not as big. Then when this attack on Tiger Hill happened, that time he and his fellow mates were attacking this position, which had only one way of attack. So there was just one route, and it was heavily guarded by the opponents, and there was no way except this one way, and we had already one casualty. So the job was to rescue that person and to sort of neutralize these 2-3 people who were inside, unknown number, which he did not know. And they were under heavy fire, and they were like, taking cover. And there were 3 or 4 of them. And the interaction between them, so Captain Batra talking to his colleague who is hiding behind another rock, trying to take an entry into this position. That interaction became public. It was later shared by because they were talking on radio. And the interaction was that it was clear to all of them that someone has to go into that camp and kill those 4 people or 5 people, how much ever are there, and try to bring back our fellow. And in that process, we will be able to capture this. That's the only way. But for that 15, 20 meters, whatever, for 15 feet or 20 feet, whatever that distance was, he was without cover. So they can kill him anytime. So who will go? So this was the negotiation. And there was no negotiation. Everyone was wanting to go. So the negotiation was who should not go. So usually what happens is, it's a lost cause, right? You're definitely 90% chance of you getting killed. So you have to draw someone, you go first. Then he'll say, no, you go. That's how it is generally. But in Indian Army, it's like, I want to go. I will go. So he's like, no. He's the Captain Batra was the commanding officer at that point in that amongst them. So he told one of the guys, he was convincing them, you have kids, don't go. You are about to be married, don't go. So this kind of a dialogue was also available. And he went himself. And this is where even again, if you see Gaurav Arya's comment, that Indian Army has the highest casualty officer to support. I mean, officer to soldier ratio, if you see casualty ratio in terms of how many officers are killed versus how many soldiers are killed. So that ratio is highest for Indian Army, which means more officers die than soldiers, relatively. So it is saying, why is that? So it is that because our officers lead from the front. So we say ki we will be the first to go. So this is how the ethos is. That if I am, generally the ethos is that if you are the team leader, you have to be protected.
Right.
So in our culture, the ethos is that if you are the team leader, it's your job to protect your people. And that is absolutely the crux of our value system coming to fore. And it is always there, but it is seen firsthand. This is what the captain is saying to his subordinates, saying, you don't go, I will go. The riskiest part I will take. And he goes. Luckily, what happened was he was not injured. He killed all those fellows. He got our guy and he was coming back. Then he was hit by a grenade, and first I think he was hit by a bullet. Sniper. And then, yeah. And he was hit, so before that, in the earlier operation, he was standing next to the guy and that guy was killed. The bullet was meant for him. And actually that other guy was killed. So he was, I think in a letter or somewhere he had mentioned, that bullet was meant for me, but it took him. Or something like that. So all these sort of events and situations, you cannot manufacture them in a movie. Okay. And when you see a normal person who can be like a next door neighbor reacting in accordance with what you can say are our values across the country, these are the natural values that we are born with. We imbibe these values every day through all our stories. And we see this person a living example of these values. No wonder he is so famous. So he has a twin brother also who looks exactly like him, apparently. But, he got into army and I think he is not in the army. He is leading a normal life.
Yeah.
So the thing is, this is what it is. A normal person doing extraordinary things.
Okay, great. So I recently watched the movie too, and most of the incidents are covered, whatever you said. But many things, I still was very engaged when you were saying all these things. So especially the example of how a normal guy can do extraordinary things are done in like from the 90s. It started like Sachin Tendulkar and Narendra Murthy and all those things. So it was very interesting listening that. Okay, so I guess our audience also liked it, and they want, if you all want to share any such incident or want to give some feedback, do connect us on Twitter, tweet us, and follow us there, follow us on Instagram or YouTube if you want to watch the video. And our podcast is available on all of the podcast platforms. So yeah, that's it for today. Thanks a lot for listening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.